Yeah, bye. All right, XOXO. Got a girl.
Audra at Home is filmed in front of a live Pitbull audience.
Good morrow and merry meet. My name is Audra and you are in for a treat. Alright, so today's video I'm going to be getting ready because I have a couple more videos that I want to film afterwards, and as such I like to do little get ready with me's, and today I'm going to be talking about the audience versus advertising in the best way that I know how. If that sounds like something interesting to you, then stay tuned and we're going to have a little bit of fun. If you have not already, please consider subscribing. It's a okay-ish time. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Also, side note, I know I just said let's get started and then I ruined it. Everybody hates it when we do that, but here we are. All, some, or none of the makeup will be listed in the description box. The majority of it is. In fact, just to cover my ass, I put it all under, affiliate links. And, those go back into my channel. So thank you if you use them. Appreciate you. Or you can just shop like you normally shop. Whatever. Let's get the makeup on the face. You know the drill. All right, so the number one reason that I even wanted to talk about this is because this has been like an ongoing situation. We all know this. Content creation since the dawn of time has always been expensive. It has always cost money. And if you don't believe me, like looking back, theater as it stands today wouldn't be here if there weren't people who, benefactors essentially, who paid for it to happen. Right? The majority of art wouldn't be here if it weren't for wealthy benefactors, because to create art, to create content means that you have to be able to focus on said content and you have to be able to pay for all of the things involved in content, right? So for instance, when I was talking about theater, right? Who is going to pay for these people to act in your play? Who is going to pay for the seamstress? Like all of that stuff. You had to have somebody pay for it, and for the longest time it was benefactors, right? You would show a wealthy benefactor your play and they would agree essentially to fund it. They'd be like, yeah, we'll fund this for you. And if it got better, and the return was good for the benefactor, they would continue to fund it, not just that play, but other arts that you may create. However, one of the biggest issues with having a benefactor was that your benefactor could, make decisions about your art that you didn't really want. So, for instance, many of you, I'm sure, have seen Moulin Rouge, and the Duke.
I don't like this ending.
That was based off of like a real thing, not like him being the Duke, but the benefactor being able to, because they were 100% financing your production, being able to make you make changes that you maybe necessarily didn't want to have to make.
Why would the courtesan choose a penniless sitar player over the Maharaja?
Very annoying and irritating for artists, and it was just kind of a shitty thing because they could at any point in time be like, wouldn't it be better if, and they're not artists. They have no fucking clue what they're talking about, and then you had to just be like, yeah, that'd be better, and change it the way that they wanted it.
I suggest that in the end the courtesan choose the Maharaja. But Tommy, but that ending does not uphold the bohemian ideals of truth, beauty, freedom. I don't care about your ridiculous dogma!
And that went on for a very long time. You would have wealthy benefactors. In fact, studios for a long time were essentially held up by a wealthy benefactor. That's just the way things went. And so this goes on and on and on and on and on. And it's just the way things are done. You have a wealthy benefactor who handles everything. But as the media starts to change from theater to radio to television, ads become a thing. We have more products. We have changed the way that we behave as consumers. And honestly, that means, and even as producers of stuff, like people who produce things have changed the way that they handle things. It used to be, you'd have a market or whatever and it would have to get around people. But now, those times have changed. Now you can actually advertise directly to people. And this is what we start seeing as an alternative to the wealthy benefactor. And when I tell y'all, that shit was so amazing for folks because they didn't have, you no longer had somebody having, you know, the last say in how you made your content and how your play ended or how it started. Like, you didn't have that situation taking place anymore. You are now free to create the content you wanted to create because advertisers weren't really interested in so much in telling you what to do, just when to do it. So what that means is, for instance, they'd be like, listen, I need you to do this ad at this time. And, you know, and a lot of it originally started with,
and now a word from our sponsors.
And that was radio. And then, you know, radio moves over to television. That's how a lot of soap operas got there, by the way. You know, sometimes people wonder where soap operas came from, and they were on the radio for a very long time. And then, of course, moved over to television. And that's why people will say, like, how long they've been on. And people are like, that doesn't make sense. It's only been on TV this long. Moved from radio. Anyways, I digress. Point is, advertisers were now utilizing these new mediums to get people to buy and be interested in their products, which fantastic, right? But as things progress, so many advertisers begin to realize that as more channels arrive, you know, there was just one, and then there's two, and then there's three. People, one, have the opportunity to just change the channel and when the now a word from our sponsors comes on. And not only just change the channel, but they can also pretty much just be like, I'm not feeling this, so I think what I'm gonna do is just like leave the room, or I'm going to go to the bathroom. So like all of these things kind of changed it because you start realizing like they don't have to sit there and stay there for your ad. So of course that's where we get product placement, right? Instead of there being an ad in the middle of the show or at some other point in the show, you would have somebody, you know, mention the product in the show. Like, you know, what are you doing, Lucy? I'm doing dishes with this Dawn soap. It's so wonderful. Gets the grease right off, right? And at the time, it was just part of shows, so it didn't seem near as awkward, I think, as it does in today's world. Because if anybody has ever seen some of the ways that they tried to do that today, and I'll have some examples moving along here shortly, but like, as you start moving along, they start realizing, yeah, let's do it in the middle of the show. Of course, that starts to change as well. And, you know, getting rid of the benefactors was paramount to being able to get more control over your content. But of course, you still, again, need to be able to produce it. One of the little known facts that I think a lot of people don't know and or realize is that, like, literally all of your favorite television shows, were paid for by advertising dollars. Like that's where it came from. Your people from Friends, all of them, Cheers, every show you enjoyed, Will and Grace, that money came from advertising dollars. Essentially, what would happen is, just like it does on YouTube today, they would come through and, you know, pay for specific time slots. And like, that's the thing, is you pay for a specific time slot and you don't really have a lot to say on what the show does, right? Just like if somebody came to me and wanted to sponsor me for something or whatever, and they were like, well, we'd like it if you didn't use, you know, fuck. And I'd be like, I can't not do that. Like, sorry, this is how I talk. And my thing would always be like, my audience would definitely notice how fucking weird that was. That I was just like, and this palette is beautiful. And it makes me happy, right? And so obviously it's no longer about policing the tone of the show, right? It becomes about seeing what kind of audience that they have and being able to capitalize on that audience and the time frame in which the show is on, like what time the show's on, and when you want to have that ad placed in the show. So the question is no longer what kind of content can we create and will this upset the benefactor? It's now just like, how do we keep making this? But also as viewers, we don't love being advertised to for multiple reasons. Like, I would argue that a lot of us don't care about ads. We just really hate the way in which they market to us and how they market to us. And arguably the largest shot fired in the war of viewers against advertising was TiVo. Now, for those of you who are way too young to remember, TiVo was the original. Like, I feel like people think that streaming killed cable, but I think actually, arguably, things like TiVo did. Because if y'all don't remember, especially back in the day, they don't do it near as much as they used to. But when I tell you that you would have your television volume on like 10, right? And you're enjoying the show. Then an ad comes on and it was so, the ad was at 20. We could never figure out, we're like, how the fuck did they make this like exponentially louder? And that was really obnoxious for a lot of reasons, right? Like for instance, if you were a person who liked to go to bed with the television on, you couldn't because like, Jesus, the way that those ads just like woke you up out of a dead sleep, you could be, you know, taking the nap of your life, but these ads were going to fuck you up, period. These ads were gonna come out and snatch your soul, and they almost always did. And you were always left sitting there like, why is this so fucking loud? Like who told them that it was acceptable for this ad to be at this volume? Certainly wasn't me. I'll be right back, I gotta grab something. Not only that, but most of the time you didn't know how long an ad was going to be. You know what I mean? You weren't positive as to how long the ad break was going to be. So things like trying to like use the bathroom and still not miss any part of the show became kind of like a joke, a water cooler joke back in the day, if I may. And you know, all of that, there are parts that you miss. It's like going to the movie theater today, which we'll talk about that some other day if y'all like this one. But that feeling of like missing out, the actual FOMO you got when you were watching a show, it just felt like you quite literally couldn't move. You know what I mean? You could not go away from your television when your favorite show is on because the fear of missing anything, and you know, and then you have the whole like weird positioning of a TV towards a fucking mirror so that while you peed, you could still see it. Listen, y'all know what I'm talking about. It wasn't just me. And then along comes TiVo. Now the main thing TiVo offered was the ability to pause live TV, right? Like that became a huge thing. Being able to pause live TV.
Come with me.
The game just started.
Thanks. With the TiVo digital recording system, you can pause while recording.
But the thing that it unintended, I think an unintended consequence was we could fast forward through commercials. So TiVo introduces us to the magic, wonder, and mystery of honestly being able to fast forward commercials. So not only could we pause live television, right? We could also just fast forward through a commercial. No more would you have to sit there and like listen to the loud noise of a commercial. You wouldn't have to like deal with any of that. But like for the first time ever, we were able to, while watching a show, pause it and be able to do things while we kind of waited for everything to catch up and then fast forward through the ads. Because ads had started getting more and more intense and longer and longer. And another side effect of TiVo was that we started to find out just exactly how long or short some of our favorite shows were. We had no idea that like a 30-minute show really was like 22 minutes. You know what I mean? When all was said and done, it was really 22 minutes. And we were like, well, why couldn't you make the show 45 minutes long? But you know, obviously it'll still work out the same because ads are ads. But we started finding out how long / short a lot of our favorite shows were. And it kind of had us looking sideways at shit like, All right, I don't know how I feel about this because, like, yeah, where people could get shows and whatnot on TV and DVD, on DVD. I don't think we really thought about it at that time, like how short it was, because you were just kind of like watching it, and it was still kind of new technology for you to be able to start watching a show like that, because that was just like not something that we could do. I don't know how else to explain this, but it just wasn't something that we could do. It wasn't like a normal occurrence. It was not a normal everyday occurrence that we could really like watch a show that, like, because shows would be in syndication, right? But if you missed it, it could be a little while before you would see that season or that episode again. It's not like today where like you miss it and you could just watch it tomorrow. You know what I mean? It wasn't the end of the world. But at this time it kind of was. Like if you missed the season finale of something, like you just missed it. There wasn't a way to see it again until the network decided to air it again. So it was just kind of this like weird limbo. And now all of a sudden you were freed up as a human being. For those of you who like to go out and do shit with other people, like you could. And it wasn't just shows, right? It was also sporting events, all of these things that you were able to now watch on your time. And as we became increasingly like a super busy, hyper-capitalistic society, being able to watch television on your time became important. But most importantly, the biggest thing was being able to watch shit commercial free and not consistently and constantly be advertised to. Chef's kiss. I know, people don't like it when you say it, but I'm saying it any fucking way. It was a chef's kiss moment. You had things like Netflix that saw the value in this. Of course, other cable companies, like the rest of the cable companies, jumped on board and started having their own versions of TiVo. Because I know people will often say that Janet Jackson created YouTube, which she did. But the platform that allowed that to happen was TiVo, because TiVo is what actually caused that drama. I think people forget that. TiVo and the ability to rewind, the way that people, thousands, millions of people rewound that moment to see it, right? And get mad. They rewound it to see it and get mad and report it. Prior to TiVo and the like, that never would have happened. The majority of us as human beings I saw that live. I shit you not, I saw it live. I literally, this was my brain. Was that? Nah, went back to my business. The next day I woke up shitstorm, all right? But you know, I think about that, like if it weren't for TiVo, that would never have happened. Like Janet would just be living her best life. And I know she doesn't like people to keep talking about it. I have to talk about it in the sense of how TiVo changed things, like how TiVo changed the game and how it really allowed us, the viewers, to have more control over our viewing experience. So a huge change in our lives was that, one, you didn't have to watch the show. This also changed the way that we talked about shows, movies, sports, all of it, because of the ability to pause television and save it for a later date. You know, let's say that you had to work a lot of overtime a couple of weeks. You were like, no, I'm gonna wait it out. Or even better, before they really started releasing DVD shows, you could just like collect several episodes at one time, and before binge watching was really a thing, binge watch it. People underestimate the magic of this. And the whole time you were binge watching it, you could do it without ads. Because binge watching prior was on things like Nick at Night maybe, even FX had like old shows and whatnot, but when you did shit like that, you still had to like wade through the ads while you were watching episode after episode of Green Acres. Yes, I loved that show. But you still had to wade through ads, and with TiVo and the like coming along, you as the viewer could be like, no thank you. Now, as the popularity of these services, because originally when TiVo came out, you had to be rich. Like you had, if you went over to somebody's house and they had a TiVo, you knew they had money. They had money, because that shit was expensive. I feel like it cost like $1,000 or so. Like it was so expensive. I remember when they would have like deals being like, now only $600. I was like, bitch, $600 is still not a lot of money. And also, if you notice me pausing or weird breaks, they are fixing the person's garage door underneath me. So like every time it goes off, I just kind of wait for it to be done and pick back up. So that's a thing. Anywho's, Shots were fired, and we, the viewers, were finally able to control our viewing experience in such a way that, like, if you happened to see an ad, right, and you're like, wait, what's that? You could rewind it, you could watch it yourself, you know what I mean, and be like, oh, that was fun or funny, and enjoy yourself. But if you didn't, or you've seen that commercial 1,000 times and don't find it funny or interesting, right, you could just skip on past it, like we do. You no longer had to be forced to watch every single ad. Now, as this starts changing and streaming becomes more popular, advertisers, of course, once again, are looking for a way to continue to advertise to the audience. And this is very important for all content creators. Now, keep in mind, I'm not just talking about YouTube here. I'm literally talking about all content creation. Television shows galore. Advertising is what makes the majority of that happen. And so the question becomes, how do we advertise? Now, this is where I talk about, you know, why things got super awkward. Because if y'all remember Wayne's World, there was a whole section about advertising, which is when it really started to get awkward again.
No, I will not bow to any sponsor.
Sorry you feel that way, but basically it's the nature of the beast.
And if you watched Bones the way I watched Bones, then you will remember the very weird awkwardness of when they started to be sponsored by the Toyota Prius. That shit got so weird and awkward. It was just very bad. And I just was like, y'all ruining the show with this shit. Please stop. Please. Because it was so embarrassing for like all of us watching. We were like, oh, this isn't.
How you doing?
Whoa, ghost driver.
How'd you do that?
It's called intelligent parking assist. The car guides itself into the parking spot.
Wow, look at that, huh?
But they were trying to go back to the old school of like, let's advertise in the show, right? Because of things like Netflix and being able to fast forward, they realized the importance of advertising in the show and having them say something about the product, because they knew they were losing people in the regular ad slots. They knew that people could fast forward. They knew that if you were watching it on a streaming service, you weren't getting ads at all, especially if you were watching on Netflix or Prime, any of those. They knew you weren't going to be watching the ad. And knowing that changed how they advertise, because they very quickly began to realize we can't advertise the way that we used to because they're not watching it. They're not gonna see it. So we have to go back to the old school of product placement.
I can't talk about it anymore. It's giving me a headache.
Here, take 2 of these.
Ah, new print. Little, yellow, different.
Unfortunately, as I've shown in some of these ads, how awkward, well, in the one actually, because I probably only found the one, but as I've shown there, it was very awkward because people were not used to that form of advertising. And I will say, like, even the bestest of actors, whatnot, they just weren't used to having to advertise like that in the middle of their show. So it did come off as very awkward and very weird. We were all just like, okay, Bones, this is weird. Like every time she was like, oh no, I don't have to put my hands on the wheel because the Prius will park for me. It was like, girl, what? We were all looking like, baby, this is so strange. Please, like, we need y'all to stop. And eventually they did, because they have not, again, perfected that. But now that brings us to YouTube. Now, and services like it, right? I get it. People get very frustrated because if you're like me, I pay for premium. I don't want ads. I'm gonna say it. I don't want ads in the middle of me talking. And I'm aware that, like, by me having premium, all my favorite creators are still getting paid, and it's better for them that I do have premium. This isn't an ad for you to have to get premium. I'm just specifically talking about advertising, and I do not want you to feel like you have to do anything different or feel pressured. That's not what this is about. We're just talking about us versus ads, and I'm included in the us. And as all things do, it moves to a pay system, right? Which we pay to not have ads. And I get it. You know, we pay for these streaming services because it allows us to watch our favorite shows and movies with nary an ad. But of course the game starts to change. Not just for us, the viewer, but also for the advertisers. The advertisers start looking and being like, yeah, no, we're not gonna keep funding your shit if we know that we're not getting any, ROI. We need to get a return on our investment. So of course the game changes again. And what that means is, yes, you pay for premium, but now there's sponsorships. What? Like, if y'all remember the early days of TikTok, you never saw an ad. Like, there wasn't an ad on the early days of TikTok. I don't even think TikTok thought that TikTok would be around this long, but here they are, right? And now there's a ad or sponsored post. Like, it feels like every 3 times that you swipe, which I always find so interesting, because it's like, damn, can I just have a moment? Like, 1 moment to myself, please? Thank you. Can I just like not have an ad come at me? Just like, let me pay for TikTok. Like, that's what I'm starting to get. Just like, let me pay for it, okay? But of course it doesn't matter, because even when we pay for it, they're going to find a way to advertise, as they should and as they're going to. Because again, content creation is wildly expensive. Even people who do YouTube, it does get very expensive. It's one of the reasons why a lot of people will not commit to continuing to do the same amount of content or type of content or even frequency of content if they're not monetized. Not because they don't love what they're doing, but because it costs a lot of money. Cameras cost money, lighting costs money, editing software, all that shit costs money. Just like with television, getting actors, all of that is going to cost you a penny here and there. Sucks, but it's true. Getting the actors, getting the film crew, all of that shit is gonna cost money. And as we have moved away from benefactors who used to fund these things for, as I said before, good and obvious reasons, because they had a way of ruining a perfectly good show, we now find ourselves in situations where advertisers are literally looking like, okay, we need to go back to the sponsorship model, right? Which means for so many of us, the dreaded sponsorships that we as viewers hate. It gets irritating because you're like, yo, I literally pay for premium to not have ads, and now they have sponsorships. But I had to really start thinking about it through the lens of reality, and my reality is the advertisers pay for all these platforms one way or another. So they're gonna get the dollar. One way I had to think about it is I had to imagine a world in which every single person could, in fact, afford to pay for premium, right? And everybody pays for premium. What does that mean for advertisers? It means that they lose their audience visually, right? They lose the ability to advertise to us because we won't be watching anything with commercials. So of course, just like we, the viewers, have evolved ways to watch content without advertisers advertising to us directly all the time, advertisers will definitely continue to evolve how they get content, they get their ads in front of our faces. They're gonna evolve too, babes. We don't get to evolve. So for every ad blocker that is created, for every sponsorship notification that shows you exactly where a sponsorship is in a video, an advertiser has already figured out a new way around it. And one super fun way is to go back to product placement, but in a different way. You know how like on, listen, don't get mad at me for this reference and don't be like, why would you bring that up today? Because I want to. But you know how in like movies like Transformers, for instance, like all of the good guy vehicles were GMs. I feel like the bad guys were Dodge, but like I can't remember that far back. But I remember they're all GM vehicles, right? That is product placement. They don't necessarily really talk about the car. They don't say anything about the car, but they paid a shit ton of money to be in that movie, all right? A shit ton of movie. Believe you me, it was quite a pretty penny. And that's also how the movie was funded. It's not just funded by like people, it's funded by ads, right? And when it comes to the YouTube sphere, I think it's really only a matter of time before almost, instead of having sponsorships, which are kind of a pain in the ass to negotiate, they're eventually just going to have product placement, okay? What is that gonna look like? Well, for starters, I think it's gonna look like me having this in my hand, and I never mention the product. I don't say anything about the product. I just have it, You know? Gets in your brain. Also, my background could very well become very much littered with products from varying brands and companies that I say nothing about, and you'll watch them appear and disappear in different points of the video, but they're there and I got paid for them to be there, which, fun fact, doesn't exactly make it sponsored, but like does. Because they're paying for it, right? They're one of my sponsors. At most, what I'm likely gonna have to do is have like a ticker that runs at the end that says thank you to the sponsors, or I will say it. But one way or another, it's just gonna be something where you don't really get to fast forward through it. It's in the video. I know you're like, Audra, please stop giving them ideas. It's too late, babes. They already know. I'm like, I guarantee you, they already know about this. And that's gonna be the new old way of doing things. Going back to just literally having products sitting there in the background that's paid to be there and paid for slots. Like the way that commercials used to pay for very specific time slots, like they continue to do now. You know, they pay for the Super Bowl time slots, etc., etc. The same thing is going to take place. Oh my God, I love wearing so much fucking blush, it's ridiculous. But the same thing's gonna start taking place on YouTube, and eventually it's just going to be a thing that we all get used to, where you notice in someone's background that for the first, let's say 2 minutes of a very specific type of video, let's say in my case, new makeup nonsense bingo, that I would have Soleil, because I love their booze. But anyways, I would have a bottle of Soleil just sitting behind me for the first 10 minutes. And they paid me an undisclosed amount of money to have it there. And as a viewer, I don't really have any control over that anymore. In fact, I can't even fight against it, because even though I'm listing them in a ticker type as a sponsor or whatever, you're not really being advertised to in the way that we look at as an ad. And I think that that's actually gonna start causing problems for YouTube, again, because they're going to have to revamp and say what would constitute a sponsorship as an ad, or a sponsorship or an advertisement. And the reason I bring this up is because once this gets started, it's more than likely going to be very ubiquitous. You won't see it really happening, but these people are getting paid. And since they're getting paid to have this product in the back or sitting somewhere in their video, but they're not mentioning said product, it does kind of hit this weird gray area. So I did all of that and said all of that to say, I know that we are constantly, as viewers of media and content, trying to find ways to enjoy the content without all the advertising. But the truth is, there really isn't a way to do that, because content, costs money. And since it costs money to make it happen, we have to find ways to get that money. It'd be great if there was a wealthy benefactor who sat there and said, Audra, I love your content so much that I'm just gonna pay you a shit ton of money to do it exactly how you want to, and then you don't ever have to do this, or that, and I wouldn't have to worry about putting ads on my videos. Not that it would matter, because YouTube could just do it anyway, so I don't have a say in that, but I could just create content and have a good time, and they would be a silent partner. But that's not how benefactors traditionally worked. More often than not, they were loud as fuck, they had way too much to say, and they ruined it. Advertising is here to stay, and we as viewers have to kind of find ways to deal with it. And I know we all feel the same way, that yes, our favorite content creators, including actors, actresses, musicians, all of them, artists, deserve to get paid, but we're just trying to find a way to make it not at the expense of our viewing pleasure, which I know, selfish. Anyway, that's it. This is the final look. I'm gonna, I guess, come in a little bit closer because why not? All right, so we got a little bit awkward, we got a little bit strange, you got way too close to my face. I hope that y'all enjoyed this video. If you did, please do me a favor and give this video a big thumbs up, so then that way the algorithm goddess can do what she does best, which is push me further down into the algorithm so that I can continue to do whatever the fuck I want to. And as usual, huge shout out to my patrons and spooky bays, yeah, without which I truly would not be able to keep the bats in the belfry and the spiders firmly ensconced in their webs. To all of you who watch, like, share, and subscribe, I appreciate you as well. I still am trying to hit 13K by my birthday, although I don't see that as a thing that's going to happen, not because I'm negative, but because I'm a realist. But I'd appreciate it if you would go ahead and subscribe or tell a friend or two. All right, $0 to be kind. It's so good for your soul because if you don't take care of it, me and my green eyebrows are gonna fuck you up, y'all. Look at this. Look at this. XOXO. Got it, girl. I am living. I am living. I should have been born with green eyebrows. I'm just saying.